Welcome to The Explainer. All right, today we're diving deep into James Clear's game-changing book, Atomic Habits. We're going to break down how the absolute smallest changes can, believe it or not, lead to some pretty incredible results in your life. Okay, so let's just get right into it. We've all been there, right? You set these huge, ambitious goals. You're going to get in the best shape of your life. You're finally going to write that book. You know the drill. But then, why do so many of these grand plans just kind of fizzle out by February? Well, the book argues that it's because we're focusing on completely the wrong thing. We're all chasing these massive, overnight transformations, but the real secret to lasting change, it's actually something much, much smaller. And to really wrap your head around this, we have to look at one of the most stunning turnarounds in the history of sports. I'm talking about the story of the British cycling team. For 100 years, British cycling was, to put it nicely, a complete joke. They had won almost nothing. In fact, they were so bad that a top European bike company literally refused to sell them bikes because they were worried it would make their brand look bad. That's how mediocre they were. But then, in 2003, everything started to shift. They brought in a new performance director, a guy named Dave Brailsford. And he came in with this simple but really powerful philosophy. This was his whole idea. He wasn't looking for some single massive breakthrough. No. Instead, he believed that if they could just find tiny 1% improvements in every single area imaginable, those little gains would add up and multiply into something extraordinary. And when I say every area, I mean it. This is where things get kind of wild. It started with the obvious stuff, redesigning the bike seats, rubbing alcohol on the tires for a little more grip. But then it went to a whole other level. They tested different massage gels. They hired a surgeon to teach the cyclists how to wash their hands properly to avoid getting sick. They even figured out the perfect pillow for each rider and painted the inside of their truck white just so they could spot tiny bits of dust that might mess with the bikes. No detail was too small to improve by 1%. So why on earth is this 1% idea so incredibly powerful? Well, the answer is a concept you might already know from the world of finance: compounding. Just like compound interest makes your money grow, your habits compound over time. And the math here, well, it's staggering. If you get just 1% better each day, by the end of the year, you'll be nearly 38 times better. But a tiny 1% decline each day, it brings you almost all the way down to zero. It's the trajectory of these tiny changes that matters so much. And let's be honest, we see this playing out on the negative side all the time, right? The little daily stresses from traffic, the negative thought loops we get stuck in, those minor frustrations. On any given day, they seem totally manageable. But day after day, week after week, they compound into much, much bigger problems. The amazing thing, though, is that this exact same principle works in reverse for building good habits, whether that's in your health, your work, or your relationships. Okay, so we get it. Small, compounding habits are the key. But how in the world do we actually stick with them? Most of us think the answer is just more willpower. But the book points to this really shocking case study that completely flips that idea on its head. Get this. During the Vietnam War, an absolutely shocking discovery was made. Research showed that as many as 20% of U.S. soldiers serving in Vietnam were addicted to heroin. Now, this caused a massive panic back home. At the time, the conventional wisdom was that heroin addiction was basically a life sentence. Experts were terrified, thinking an entire generation of soldiers was going to be addicted for life. But then, a researcher named Lee Robbins did a follow-up study and found something that nobody expected. She discovered that 9 out of 10 soldiers, that's 90%, simply quit their addiction almost overnight, the moment they came back home. I mean, think about that contrast. For the typical rehab patient, the relapse rate is about 90%. For these soldiers, it was the exact opposite. So what on earth was going on here? Well, it wasn't about some superhuman willpower. It was about a radical, sudden change in their environment. In Vietnam, the soldiers were surrounded by constant, obvious triggers for drug use. Back home, all those triggers were gone. And it all comes down to this really simple but powerful equation from a psychologist named Kurt Lewin. Behavior is a function of the person in their environment. So the real secret to self-control isn't just wishing you had more discipline, it's about creating a more disciplined environment for yourself. Okay, so changing your environment, that's the crucial external shift. But the most powerful change, The kind that really lasts is internal. It's about who you believe you are.
See, the real goal isn't just to do a new habit. The ultimate goal is to become a new kind of person.
There's this great story in the book about a guy named Brian Clark who was a lifelong nail biter. He didn't just stop a bad habit. He actually changed his identity. By getting a manicure and seeing his hands looking well cared for, he started to feel proud of them. He wasn't just resisting an urge anymore. He was becoming the kind of person who takes care of their hands. And as soon as your pride gets involved, you'll fight tooth and nail to maintain your habits. Okay, so this all sounds great in theory, but how can you actually apply this stuff right now? Like today. The book gives us some really simple, practical tools to get the ball rolling. First off, get really specific. It's called an implementation intention. So don't just say, oh, I'll exercise more. No, decide I will go for a 20-minute walk at 8 a.m. in my neighborhood park. This works because you're not waiting around for motivation to strike. You've already made the decision. And the research is clear. This simple act of planning more than doubles your chances of actually doing it. Clarity is power. And second, you have to become the architect of your own environment. Prime your space for success. If you want to draw more, leave your notebooks and pencils out on your desk. If you want to exercise in the morning, lay out your workout clothes the night before. The whole goal is to make your good habits the path of least resistance. And this works for breaking bad habits too. Want to watch less TV? Take the batteries out of the remote and put it in another room. Just add a little bit of friction. And that really brings us to the most important takeaway of all. Every single action you take is like a vote for the type of person you want to become. Real change doesn't start with a revolution. It starts with one small habit, one tiny vote at a time. So the final question isn't just what do you want to do, but who do you want to become?